Hello, it's Joanna Lumley here. And before we start this podcast, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Actors Benevolent Fund, which is here to support actors and stage managers in times of illness, injury, old age, and financial hardship. This industry can be wonderful, but it can also be challenging. And the ABF is here to help by offering grants in times of need and by providing a sense of community. If you're in the position to help support others in our industry, or if you need support yourself, you can find details of how to contact the ABF, as well as ways of keeping up to date with developments via social media, in the show notes of this episode. Meanwhile, why not become a member, which you can do through the ABF website. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to the ABF podcast, where each week we invite special guests to talk to us about challenges they faced in the theatre and TV industry, from dealing with performance anxiety to rejection to coping with ageing and questions around our identity. Sat alongside them each week, we have coaches and therapists to help unpack the subject and offer practical advice. My name is Hannah Whittingham and I will be your host. In today's episode, we're chatting to Tanya Reynolds about handling performance anxiety. Tanya is probably best known for playing Lily in the Netflix hit series Sex Education and Mrs. Elton in the 2020 film of Emma. But she's had a varied career spanning TV, film and stage. Alongside Tanya, we have therapist and counsellor Fiona Macbeth, who specialises in working with performers and ran the counselling service at a musical theatre college for several years. Welcome to you both. I'm going to start with you, Tanya. So most people would assume that someone they see on telly who is objectively doing very well and seems very self-assured would not have an issue in any way with this kind of performance anxiety or nerves, particularly not on set. But what has your experience been?
I mean, I like 90% anxiety, like with my whole entire being. When I was young, like when I was a child, I just wasn't anxious about performing at all. I was incredibly like self-assured and confident when it came to performing. And I've never had stage fright really, but being on sets actually, because obviously I've my career has predominantly been in TV and film, really, mostly TV. And I find being on sets and being behind the camera or in front of the camera rather, like I'm immensely anxious all the time, most of the time. Yeah. I mean, I love it, but
That's really interesting that you said it wasn't something that you were aware of being a thing for you when you were younger. When did it first start manifesting itself?
Well, I feel like it's kind of gotten worse in a lot of ways as I've got older, like the more work I've done. And I feel like I feel like when I left drama school, I kind of left with I'm really grateful for my drama school experience and like I took so many positive things from it. But I did also leave with a kind of dent in my self-esteem. And a lot of that was down to the kind of overthinking aspect that I felt like my time at drama school really fed.
Right.
And then, so I feel like I went in feeling like I know what acting is and I feel like I can do it and I really enjoy it. And it was very simple. It was like acting is pretending to be other people as believably as possible. And that's really fun. And then I kind of came out of drama school like, I don't know what it is. I don't think I can do it. I'm obviously not very good at it. It's this weird unattainable thing that I just don't have any access to and I can't reach it. And I just came out so self-conscious. And then I think starting to work in like my very first job when I left drama school was a film, and then it was a TV show, and then it was, you know, a string of TV really. And I think that being on camera, I think, was something that I wasn't expecting to find as kind of difficult for my anxiety as it was.
Yeah, it's funny because I think when people think of performance anxiety, they think of stage fright.
Yeah.
And they think of, there are all these people in front of you that you can see with your own eyes in the moment, rather than the future numbers of people that might be watching something after it's transmitted. But did it start from the very first job then, when you left drama school? Can you remember what that job was?
Yeah, I can. It was a really amazing experience that I hold very, very, very dear to me. Like, I had the best time, but it was that feeling of, because, you know, growing up doing theatre and going to drama school is predominantly doing stage stuff, and, you know, I did theatre at university and all that, and then suddenly, just that act of like it being like what you're doing being recorded, and then that's it, and you're like, no, I haven't, that wasn't right, I didn't get that right. And that was just a new anxiety that I hadn't really experienced before, because I just didn't have any or much experience on camera. And I found it really hard to kind of relinquish that control of no, you get your 3 takes, and then it goes into the ether and it goes to the editor and the director, and just feeling like no, that wasn't right, I didn't feel it wasn't good enough, I did that wrong, and blah blah blah. And it was that like over I just became like so overly critical, and like of every little thing that I would do.
I mean, that's a really interesting element, and I'm going to bring Fiona in a moment to talk about this a bit, because that to me as well, there's an element of just a complete lack of control in terms of, not only that's 3 takes and it's it, and there's no chance to revisit it like you would in a long run and evolve it as well, but also you don't choose which take they choose.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that factors in to that at all, but that just lack of control over where it ends up and which one gets used.
Yeah. Oh my God, big time. Yeah, because I feel like that would also be a thought in my head as well. And it's things that you just shouldn't be thinking when you're in a scene or whatever. And when you're on stage, you're not thinking, I feel like on stage, I'm so much less likely to have stage fright, because I just feel like, okay, this is just me. Like, I'm in control of my performance, and there's no one else. Like, I can't blame anyone else if it's shit. Like, it is just me and the other actors, and we're going to do this together. And you're there and you're in the moment and it's immediate. Whereas just the stopping and starting of film work is just, it's difficult. It's a real skill.
Yeah.
That, you know.
And how does it manifest itself? What happens when you go into that anxiety mode?
I mean, for me, a lot of it is like, I have real issues with self-critique, and I mean, every actor does, I guess, but like, you know, and there's, you know, the voice in my head telling me that, like, before I've even opened my mouth, before they've even said action, there's something in my head saying, oh, you're so shit, and this is going to be so bad. And everyone around you is looking at you and thinking how bad this is. And those people watching the monitor, they're not looking at it thinking, oh, she's so great, what's she going to do? They're thinking, she's awful, let's just get through this. Like, it's just already like putting negativity out there before I've even said my first line. And then that kind of just, when I feel, when I'm dealing with that kind of criticism that I'm putting on myself, it just kind of freezes me up. Like, it just...
Physically as well.
Yeah, physically. And, you know, I'll say the lines and I'll do the movements, but like, it's like I'm kind of behind glass. Like, I'm not fully, I feel like the performances that I'm most proud of are the ones where I really did not feel self-conscious. And so I didn't have those voices in my head, and I really felt good about what I was doing. And then I just feel like physically free, vocally free.
Yeah. I was going to ask, does it affect your voice?
Yeah, big time. I feel like it. And I don't know if it's something that just, I notice or other people can, because obviously we know all our own tics and stuff, but I can literally see it. I feel it. Like it feels like my voice gets restricted. I feel like my face, like my effect gets restricted. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess just before we do bring Fiona in, I'm really interested in auditions as well, because obviously the big three that the screen work, the stage work, and then auditions are something that generally people get quite terrified about.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about those? Does it get the same sort of effect for you?
I mean, obviously, obviously in-person auditions are quite a rarity now.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of tapes, but I mean, obviously, especially if it's something I really, really care about and I really want, like, of course I get nervous. But I do feel like with auditions, I'm far less anxious than I am actually on the job when I get the job, because there's something about the parameters around an audition, like the fact that you usually only have a couple of days to prepare. So that means you can only do a certain amount of work on it. You can only
really
you can only do so much. And you kind of have to go on your instinct, because you just don't have time really to think about anything else. And then that, I just feel like, really frees me up. I have an instinct and I just kind of go with that. And then I just sort of feel like in the audition, I'm either right for this or I'm not. And that I just find really liberating. And I feel like I actually audition better than I perform.
That's interesting.
Which is really bleak. But like, because it's when I get the job that the anxiety starts, because it's like, it's when you're auditioning, there's nothing to lose because the job isn't yours.
Yeah.
And then when you get the job, it's like, oh shit, now I've got to prove that I'm worthy of it.
Yeah.
And then the pressure starts to mount, and then the anxiety kicks in.
I think that's really interesting. And actually, oddly, I find that a very helpful thing to think about auditions, that actually having those parameters, suddenly to me, now you've said that, I think actually, yeah, they're fine.
Yeah.
They're all right. They're no bother at all. That's all good. Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really useful way to think about it as well. So well done you for having managed to psych yourself into that. Fiona, I want to bring you in here just to talk about a little bit about what we are talking about. First of all, how common is performance anxiety?
Well, the way Tanya's described it and beautifully explained is one label just does not describe this situation. It's a very complex set of issues that interact with each other in such a way to make life quite difficult for us at times. So I think it's very common, to have difficulty of this nature. I think is very common in performance. Most people don't fess up to it though. And I think that's really sad in the industry, that they can't talk more openly about it. When I was at the Musical Theatre College, a lot of people seemed to have a fear of talking about it because they thought that might actually create it for them or associate them with it, or somehow, make them more prone to it. And actually, I think it's the opposite.
That's interesting.
I think if we can talk about it and if we can normalise it in some way, because it is a very normal reaction to a very difficult thing that we're asking people to do. Let's face it. So if we can normalise it and recognise that everybody, I believe, at some time in their life probably experiences it to some extent. Certainly the people who never experience it are absolutely in the minority. It would make it easier for people to cope with it and not just think this is something terrible that is only ever happening to me.
Yeah. And I do feel as well when I'm on a job, if I voice it and say I did it literally last week with the director of the show I'm working on at the moment. I just said at the end of the day, I was like, oh mate, I'm really anxious. I'm really, really anxious. And I feel like just saying it out loud, just sort of, I don't know, it lifts something off of you and it puts it out in the space. And it's like, okay, well, we've got that and we can deal with that. And how are we going to deal with that? I'm not being articulate with what I mean,
No,
but I
it
just
makes-
feel like just saying it, putting it in the room, and also talking with other actors, because as well, the amount of times that I'm on something, and if I'm sitting in the green room with an actor and I'm just like, oh dude, I feel so anxious, I'm panicking. So often I feel like actors especially are the most supportive people, because they all we've all experienced it, or are experiencing it, or have had experiences with it, and so I feel like we're all really equipped to deal with it when other people are going through it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm like, if I'm with an actor and they say they're anxious, I'm like, right, here we go. I know exactly what you need. I know exactly what to do for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do feel like talking about it is a really healthy thing.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point, Fiona, that you brought up there, that this idea that people almost think it's infectious, and that if you tell someone you're nervous, it's going to make someone else nervous because you've mentioned the nervousness. And that's really interesting to flip that and go, actually, no, the more you talk to people, the more supportive people can be. It's out in the open, everyone realizes they're not on their own. And also the point you made there, that it is completely rational.
Yeah.
Particularly whether you're on the stage or whether, as you've described, you're in front of a camera, which, albeit you've just got the crew in the room, but you have no idea how many, potentially millions of people are going to watch it later. Because your eyes going, sorry, Tanya. I hate to tell you, Tanya, but you are in a very, very popular television series. There are going to be a lot of people watching. But it is completely rational. And I think there can probably be a lot of shame perhaps attached to it as well, when people think that they're overreacting to the situation. That if you put most people in that situation, anyone in that situation, they're going to have the same response.
But the thing as well is, by not talking about it, you add the extra complication of the guilty secret thing. Oh my God, it's only me and nobody's got to see, and I must keep it into myself and hide it. And that's extra pressure, that's extra stress.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double whammy if you don't open up about it, really.
Yeah.
To the right people and at the
Yeah.
right time, obviously.
Yeah.
But shall I just try and unpack some of the stuff that's
Please
going
do,
on? Because
yes.
it is a very complex thing. I mean, at its core is a totally long-term natural reaction to threat, which is like the fight or flight reaction, which is one of our oldest sort of reactions to physical threat. It comes from when we were hunter-gatherers, and if there was something that was going to threaten us or kill us or take our food source away, that was what kicked in. Unfortunately, as we get more sophisticated and there's fewer sort of woolly mammoths roaming around, we get the imaginary threat. And that's why what Tanya was saying about the overthinking and stuff is so key here.
Yeah.
So you've not just got the original fight or flight survival reaction. You've got the sophisticated overthinking, the perfectionism, the self-criticism, the time between takes to let that really ramp up and really go. And this is the stuff that really does the damage. The physical threat we can deal with. It's there, it kills us, or it's gone. Job done.
Yeah.
But the imaginary stuff is toxic. There is no end to how much we can run with this thing. And during COVID, we proved that. You know, in lockdowns, most people just got into overthinking in such a bad way. It was terrible. So that is the thing that does the damage. It's acute stress that it starts with.
Right.
But lots of other things then kick in to make it very complex. And what Tanya was saying about in our child state not having this is classic, because children don't have the imaginary threat capability that more sophisticated adults have.
Yeah.
So when you're a child, it's, oh, so-and-so's been mean to me at school, or that teacher made me look an idiot, or whatever. It's a tangible thing, you know, that is what you're upset about. But when you're over 12, normally, that is the sort of age when these things kick in, suddenly you begin to imagine the judgment of others. So-and-so thinks I'm an idiot. So-and-so won't play with me because they think I smell, or whatever, or I'm not pretty enough, whatever it is, you know. But the imagination starts ramping this up.
Yeah.
And that is where it gets really tricky and really difficult. And of course, the older we get, the better our imagination gets, because our life experience is expanded.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting when you talk about children, that actors are encouraged to reconnect with their inner child, because that's the exciting acting. That's where all the impulse comes from. And yet you're being asked to be a child in an environment which is an adult environment, where you are fully aware of judgment and things that might go wrong, things that have gone wrong, all of the experiences you have as well.
Yeah.
That's a big ask of anyone, I think.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, this is probably another podcast, but that's when you get the sort of true inner self surrounded by the defensive suit of armour, if you like, which we all put on to protect ourselves in everyday situations. Actors, I would have thought more than most. Well, you're doing the ultimate. You're putting on another character, to protect the inner stuff. But at times, the inner sort of is struggling with this because they're worried about the defences being breached and the inner fragility being seen.
Yeah.
So that's added stress. So, it's another podcast, but it's part of this as well.
It's another series, I think, actually. What are the ways then that performance anxiety often does show itself or manifest itself in people?
Well, because it's fight or flight, you've got very strong physical symptoms because, the body is being prepared to fight to the death, run for the hills, or actually there is a third one, play dead.
Yes.
So all your internal organs and systems are preparing for these kind of eventualities. So, for example, the blood flow, all goes to the vital organs because that's where they're going to be needed most. So face might go red, chest might go red, but hands might go very cold. Feet might go very cold. Heart rate, very, very fast, obviously. Body tenses up, ready to fight, Every muscle sort of is tensing up there. Breathing becomes very shallow. You stop breathing in your stomach, it's all in your chest, which again increases the anxiety.
Makes you faint. Makes you feel faint.
Yeah, feel dizzy. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why controlled breathing is a great thing that hopefully I'll talk about later. Stomach and guts, we all know what happens there. Basically, it wants to empty itself so you can run faster.
Oh, yeah.
So you can run faster and get away.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you've got the trembling hands, the shaky voice, because the intensity is in the internal organs that are going to help you survive or not whether your hands are nice and controlled and all the rest of it, or whether your voice is smooth. My voice just went then. That was really weird.
It's perfectly on cue though.
But you also get a lot of psychological symptoms as well. So you can't focus on things. You've got the attention span of a goldfish or less. It's very difficult. Irritability is a major factor if it goes on. Get very irritable, very short-tempered.
Tanya's doing a lot of nodding to that one.
And just generally a feeling of being overwhelmed, which leads to this feeling of absolute dread and doom. That you're not going to survive this. This is what the feeling is about. Fight or flight. It's your survival.
Yeah.
Tanya, you're doing lots of nodding. Is this sounding familiar?
Oh my gosh, so familiar. That's just like a Tuesday for me. Yeah, all of those things, and the amount of times I'm in a scene and I feel like I'm going to faint because just what you said, I'm breathing in my chest, and then I get so dizzy, and I'm just thinking, oh my god, I'm going to faint, and it's so hard in acting, obviously, it's so important to be present. And I find it so hard so much of the time to be present because everything you just explained is kind of what is happening to my body and my brain. Sometimes more severely than others, but yeah.
But that's the ultimate disassociation, isn't it? That's the ultimate defense. You play dead.
Yeah.
You disassociate yourself from what's going on around because you can't really cope with it.
Yeah.
And that is when you feel it's all behind glass and you're not really there. And that is a scary enough thing on its own.
Yeah.
It's quite a cocktail, isn't it?
It really is. And I guess, where is the line, do you think, Fiona, between useful nerves, which have a place in performance, and when it tips over into this sort of anxiety?
Well, there is some sort of graph for this online that you can look up if you want. But, we all need a certain degree of arousal because otherwise it's boredom. We're just bored and we can't be bothered to do anything. We need a certain degree. And then we have an optimum state of arousal when we're probably at our best. We're feeling sharp, we're feeling on our game, we're feeling energised, but we're not feeling overwhelmed. But if we get too much adrenaline in there, it tips over and we get to this overwhelmed where we're just not performing our best. We're fighting other things. There's too much else going on.
Yeah.
And we just get into the red area.
Yeah. Tanya, am I right in thinking that you have managed to develop anxiety about not being anxious?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a really big thing for me at the moment. I did a job last year And when it started, I was just having a really nice time and like just feeling really good about what I was doing and like what I really loved the script. I loved the cast. It was just something I was just really excited about, and I just was going with my instinct and just having a nice time. And then as the weeks went on, it got on to like the second week or something, and I started to panic that like the fact that I hadn't been anxious was not a good thing. All of a sudden it was scary, and I was like, I haven't really been anxious this whole time. I've been really comfortable. And is that bad? Is that a bad thing? Is the fact? And then I became so anxious, like doubt, like just, and my brain became like, oh God, like a vicious dungeon of critique. And it was horrible. It was a nasty, nasty place. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, you know, every week, and she'd kind of seen me go from, you know, yeah, I'm having a really good time and I feel really good about myself, to like 2 weeks later being like, I'm panicking that the fact that I haven't been panicking is a bad sign. And maybe I'm just phoning it in. Maybe I'm just being lazy. Maybe this is a really bad thing. And she kind of helped me see that because I am so anxious all the time about everything. I'm just a very anxious person. I live in a constant state of anxiety about anything and everything. And same with, you know, depression. And anxiety and depression have been such a big part of my life for, I mean, since I was a teenager. That she's kind of made me see that these states are kind of like, they're almost safe. And whenever I don't feel anxious or depressed, I suddenly feel unsafe, because I kind of don't know what that space is like, and I'm scared of it. And there's something in my brain that's like, well, you've got this far being an anxious, depressed mess. So anything that isn't that is suddenly scary and unsafe. And very.
There's a great Hugh Laurie quote, which is, if something is worth doing, it's worth getting thoroughly miserable about, which I feel like I've always lived to that.
It's a sad thing though, isn't it? That we do actually gravitate towards the familiar, even when it's not good.
Yeah.
That is the human condition, but it's actually really sad.
Yeah.
So you kind of know anxiety, you know how it works.
Yeah.
So when you're not there, it just does feel a little bit insecure, which is very odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something to work against, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely. My dad once said to me, it was actually after I'd found out I got the part in sex education. So this was like in 2018. And like I'd auditioned for that role so many times, and like it was a really long road to getting it, and then I finally got it, and it was like, oh my God, it was such a relief. It was amazing. And I spoke to my dad on the phone, and he was like, bloody hell, so you got it? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, were you happy? And I was like, oh yeah, but I'm really nervous, because now, you know, because I started filming, like I found out I got it, and then I started filming like 4 days later.
Oh, wow.
And I started to be like, yeah, I'm just really nervous because, you know, I've only got 4 days, and like I'm really nervous that they're going to sack me, and that I'm not going to be good enough, and that maybe it's a mistake, and why did it take so long to cast me? Maybe I'm not right for it. Maybe they didn't really want me, maybe all this stuff. And my dad was just like, he was like, when is the part where you are happy about this?
Yeah.
He was like, you love acting. This is your dream job. If you can't be happy now, when you've just got an amazing part in a big Netflix show, when are you happy?
Yeah.
He was like, why are you doing it then?
Yeah.
And it was like, it was a real wake up call. It was like, oh, he was so right. But it is what you said. It's just the weird, the familiar, the comfort in the familiar. It's like we know where we're at when we're criticizing everything and when we're being negative about everything. That's just a space that we know and we understand, even if it makes us miserable.
Yeah. And I wonder, Fiona, as well, where the overlap is between, I mean, Tanya's spoken about sort of other anxieties outside of specific performance anxiety in the theatre or on film, but is there an overlap? Is it that there is, you are much more likely to get stage fright / performance anxiety if you are already sort of a fairly anxious person? Are there some people that it just comes out of nowhere? What's the difference, if there is any, between a sort of generalized anxiety and a specific performance related anxiety?
Well, there's massive overlap between all those things.
Yes.
Because very rarely do people just have one label.
Yeah.
It's kind of a combination. We're all individuals. So, there's common themes, if you like, but there's no distinct formula that everybody adheres to, really, I suppose. Actors have to be sensitive people. They have to be able to empathise with people. And I was just reading a book about burnout the other day, that empathy is actually one of the most dangerous characteristics.
Is it?
Because you tend to overreach and over-emotionally stretch yourself for the benefit of others, but to your own detriment.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of really interesting way of looking at empathy, if you think about it. And I think, people like actors and performers generally are very much at risk of that all the time. So, yes, I would think because of their nature, performers and actors in particular are at risk of anxiety and sensitivity, if you like. Where that crosses the line into something which is an issue which is difficult to live with is an individual thing, really, and depends very much on the combination of things that you're dealing with at that particular time. So, for example, I would think that you're more susceptible to performance anxiety if you have other major stressors going on in your life at that time.
Yeah.
For example, if you're trying to get back into the business after COVID, when you're wondering whether the business is going to be there after COVID and everything hangs on it. If you've just had a relationship breakdown where your self-esteem has suffered massively and you're not really the most confident of people, then you go in front of cameras or whatever, that is quite a lot of stress to handle at one time. Generally, if you've had a disappointment or you've got other financial worries going on as well, these are all going to pile up. And if you load, major performance major performance needs on top of that, it could just overwhelm. I think that's a situation. And that's why I think sometimes people have they have episodes of this and then it disappears for quite some time and might not recur unless there's some other things going on in your life that cause it to tip over.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, Tanya, are there certain circumstances in which it is more likely that you will become very anxious when you're working? Is there anything you've put your finger on? Whether it's in the job itself or whether it's anything else that's going on.
I mean, it's so many factors. I mean, I do tend to feel very anxious because I have quite bad social anxiety, and I find just being in crowded spaces or really busy spaces where I just feel like kind of overly stimulated. I find I can get very anxious in those kind of situations. So if there's ever scenes where it's like a lot of people, that's going to cause a lot of anxiety. There was a scene actually in season 3 of Sex Education where I had to be on the stage in the school hall, like an assembly. And so, this hall of, I don't know how many extras, and the extras on that show are so lovely and supportive and just gorgeous. But like, I was on a stage in front of all of these people and then the cameras, and I was so anxious. I couldn't look up. I was just looking at the ground, and it was like my heart was racing. I was just felt like frozen. which, you know, was kind of fine for the scene, because I was like, well, she's probably really anxious in this moment as well, so this is great. No acting required. But those kind of environments, I will feel, way more inclined to anxiety. And also just an environment when, if for whatever reason I just don't feel, if I feel like intimidated, I mean, it's the same for everyone really, I guess. If you feel acting is such a vulnerable thing, and you're really putting yourself out there, even if it's a scene where, you know, you're fully clothed and you're just, the scene is you buying something from a shop, even if it's the most simple, in, you know, inverted commas, what is it called? In bunny ears. Even if it's the most simple scene, you're still putting yourself out there. You're still naked in a way. People are looking at you. People are, you know, judging you, or, you know, in some way. And if you feel like, if you, for whatever reason, don't feel safe, or don't feel like supported or encouraged, or like if there's a coldness to the environment, I find that like the coldness of the room will seep into my bones, and I will feel cold, and then I'll feel frozen, and I'll panic, and, you know, so I just feel like the environments where I feel the least anxious are where I just feel, where there's a calmness, where there's, you know, a lot of supportive energy and a warmth to the people that I'm working with. Yeah, those are kind of the best. But that's kind of, you know, for anyone and anything really, isn't it?
But no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I mean, you know what happens when you see people who aren't used to it just being asked to walk somewhere on camera, and nobody can walk anymore.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre thing that happens to people when they say, how does this work? I don't even remember. But Fiona, I mean, from your experience, about probably having spoken to a lot of performers about this as well, with your job sort of running a counselling service, are there certain sets of circumstances where performance anxiety is much more likely to be worse in the job itself, as opposed to sort of other life things that are going on?
Well, there certainly can be triggers or additional things that don't help. I think the sensory overload that you talked about is really key for some people, you know. Not being given enough space, too many people in your face, you don't have time to process anything. Noise can be a big issue for some people. They just can't stand noise, or having to wear certain pieces of costume that they don't feel comfortable in at all is well can make it very difficult. People who you don't feel get you, or you don't feel attuned with, can also not help in these situations. But I think ultimately it's about your state of being. It's about whether you're tuned into yourself too much and your self-doubts, or whether you can turn that off and look outwards. You know, if I sat here and thought about what bollocks I'm talking, or if my stomach's going to growl, or, you know, do I really know anything about this at all, I would probably really start struggling to get the words out. But if I listen to what Tanya's saying, and I actually try to concentrate on her words and make sense of them, I suddenly feel fine and I can talk. And it's the same in life, isn't it? You know, if we can get away from that self-critical, what the hell are you talking about? You're talking rubbish. And actually just zone in on somebody else, or some other place, or what we're trying to communicate, or what is actually going on here. We suddenly feel much calmer. We suddenly feel more in control.
There's contact with another human as well, isn't it? It's just there's another actual human being in the room. It's not just me on my own doing this monologue.
I'm not on my own. I'm communicating. I'm engaging. You know, I know what's going on. So try not to go over into yourself, because there lies self-doubts, overthinking, and getting lost.
And this is a really good little segue, actually, Fiona, into any advice you can give, or I suppose just not so much advice as sort of practical things that people might be able to employ who have to get up on stage or be in front of a camera and suffer this sort of thing.
Well, health warning, I think it's very different for each individual, and everybody ultimately has to find their own way to deal with whatever issues they might have. But I think it's very important that people think about psychological preparation for roles or auditions or challenges in life. And they don't just think about physical, do I know the lines? You know, have I said them enough? You know, do I know this character? Because I've no doubt that you do know all that. And you should stop that at a certain point and think, right now, mentally, I'm going to get my head straight for this. I'm going to actually prepare my head. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means pulling back and taking as much time as you need to get in the right psychological state for doing this. You know, it means calming. It means doing controlled breathing from your stomach, not from your chest. Absolutely getting yourself in a much calmer state mentally. It might mean listening to some music if that's audio does it for you, or looking at some photographs if that does it for you, you know, or visualizing yourself in a calm place that you really like going for a walk or being on a beach or something, or actually visualizing one of the performances where you feel you nailed it, where you got the feeling that you were really on it, running through that in detail, minute detail of all your 5 senses being engaged could be a really good preparation, you know, if that works for you.
Yeah.
Or listening to a podcast, listening to somebody's voice, you know, anything like that. But taking the time to use the tool that you know works best for you. And you can have a variety of tools, but you'll know the ones that are most effective to get yourself in a calm, good level space, as well as doing all the physical relaxation of trying to take the tension out of your body, which I presume most people do anyway. But then the most important thing is trying to remove or tune out from these negative thoughts. Just try to kick them into touch for this time and get some default positive or at least reasonable thoughts in your head.
Yeah.
So if you have a panic and you grab for a thought, you don't get something toxic.
Yeah.
Even if it's just something like, I've got this, I can do it. You know, think about your experience and your learning and trust yourself that you can do this because you've done it so many times before.
Yeah.
And have that thought uppermost in your head so you've got something to hold on to if the going gets a bit bumpy.
Yeah.
Try to be in the moment as well.
Yeah.
Try to actually look at external indicators like, I don't know, focus on something that's on the set or focus on some actor's hand or something that will bring you back to the moment and to reality.
Yeah.
And out of your head, because that's really important.
Yeah, I really like that. Just those 3 big ones, really. Just spend as much time preparing your mindset as your lines. I think is a really nice one.
Yeah.
Exercising your toxic thoughts, however you choose to do that, and just finding a way that can bring you into the moment, whatever that is, whether it's a visual thing, whether it's keying into sounds, whatever helps you. But Tanya, do you have sort of similar coping strategies that you've discovered over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting you said, Fiona, the focusing on something on set, because that is something that I really try and do. From my very first job, I was working with the incredible Maxine Peake, not to just to drop that name in there.
Clang.
Good. But she I said to her once, I was like, how do you stay present? Because, you know, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm anxious and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, sometimes I just kind of stare at something that is on the set and just like focus on that, because sometimes as well there's so much chaos going on the set and you've got to stay in the moment or whatever, and you're trying to focus for the scene, and it's really, and I get sensory overload and I'm like a sponge and I absorb whatever kind of, if everyone's tense, which is most sets most of the time, I absorb that, and then I'm suddenly tense and I'm stressed and I'm, you know, and just like I try now to just like stare at something that's on the set and just focus on that and breathe into my tummy so I don't go all dizzy. And also the like years ago I had cognitive behavioral therapy for health anxiety, and the therapist told me to like to when I was having like what we'd call like an irrational thought, which was like I'd be like convinced that I had whatever illness at the time. I was very convinced I had a blood clot in my leg specifically.
That is very specific.
Yeah. And it was a whole thing. It was a whole thing. It went on for years, but I was really, really convinced about it. And I saw so many doctors who were like, you just don't have a blood clot. I don't know what to tell you. And I was like, no, but I do. And I'm going to die. And because of this, because it's gone undiagnosed and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it was just a very specific anxiety. And for some reason, I could not be convinced otherwise, no matter how many tests I had, no matter how many medical professionals were like, you are fine. And the therapist told me to, like, when I was having like a panic about something like that, to write it down on a piece of paper, to write 2 columns on a piece of paper, and then in one column write the thought that I was having, like, I've got a blood clot in my leg and I'm going to die. And then in the next column write a kind of counter thought to that, but using evidence. So it would be like, well, I've just had this blood test, which was normal, and I've seen this doctor and he said that it's fine, blah, blah, blah. And it really did work. And I tried to do that with my negative thoughts about my work when I'm suddenly about to film a scene or whatever, and my brain starts going, oh, everyone in this room thinks you're shit and you are so shit, and like they cast you as it was a mistake. Like you're gonna disappoint everyone, blah blah blah. I just kind of try and like hear that as if someone else was saying that to me, and how irrational that would sound. And then what I would say, what evidence I would give to prove that wrong. It's like, well, you didn't get here by accident. Like no one's giving you this job out of charity. You earned it. You auditioned for it. You know, they've cast you for a reason. You're here for a reason. You've got things to offer. And it's just exactly what you said, Fiona, about like exercising those negative thoughts with positive ones that actually you can back up with evidence.
And actually, just to clang another name on the floor, Tanya, I believe Bill Nye might have given you some quite good advice at some point.
Do you know, it wasn't actually, it wasn't advice. It was just like, he just made me feel so much better one day when I was anxious. It was on Emma, and it was like one of my first days, and I had this like big like monologue, and I was so intimidated because I was working with like all these amazing actors, and I felt properly like, I mean, just imposter syndrome central. I was like, what am I doing here with Bill Nye and Anya Taylor-Joy and Mia Goth? It was just mad. And I was so anxious. And we did the rehearsal, and I did my monologue, and I was so nervous about it. And I think Bill just like, he's talked about, you know, nerves himself before. And I think he obviously just sensed it in me, and he just kind of stopped me when I was leaving the room, and he just went, that was perfect. That was like completely unprompted. And he was just like, that was perfect. Just do exactly what you did. That was great. And it was just like, and he just took the time to talk to me about how he gets nervous and stuff. And it just made me, it was what we were saying at the very beginning about when you're on set or backstage or whatever, and you talk about, when you share your stories about anxiety or nervousness, especially when you're an actor who is like Bill, who's like everyone's, you know, a national treasure, for a national treasure to say like, yeah, I see you and I feel you, because I feel that. It just makes you feel like the nerves of that day were eradicated, because it was like, I felt seen, I felt understood, and I also felt like supported and encouraged. Like, and it was so lovely. And now I hope that I can like bring that energy to, if I'm ever working with an actor who I can sense is anxious, I really want to be able to like bring that calm to them and just say, it's okay, it's a safe space, you're great, like, I get you, I get it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, Fiona, I know it's difficult because anxiety is in your head, but are there things, do you think, that other people can do to help, or an environment that can be created that can help when somebody is suffering quite a lot from performance anxiety?
Well, I mean, it's important to point out that it feels so much worse than it ever looks. It probably doesn't even look like anything externally.
Yeah.
And you need to remind yourself of that you think everybody can see this, but they probably have no idea whatsoever. So be aware of that. And I don't, despite saying about talking about it and normalising it and being very important, I don't think this should be a team activity, ideally. I think it is for the individual to be supported to conquer it, really, or change it. So what you were talking about there with Bill Nye is brilliant, because that, I think, is the most valuable thing that somebody can do for you if they see that you are, or you express that you are struggling, is just to be super calm and super grounded. Because having somebody like that as ballast to your wobbliness will be the most helpful thing around. Yeah. And if they can throw in something encouraging like that was brilliant, so much the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's the idea of creating almost just a supportive environment, almost like a container, so that you can then use your toolkit that you then have to be able to help yourself.
It's okay is the most important message. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's fine.
Yeah. And to know as well that that you are able to do good work in spite of it, because I always worry that the anxiety limits me, and sometimes it really does, like I said earlier, vocally, physically, but also and then that kind of sense, it's like a vicious cycle, because then I get anxious, and then I get anxious about the fact that I'm anxious, and I'm like, well, this is going to ruin my performance or whatever. But to know that you can do good work even if you are feeling that way is really like useful to know.
I always think it's almost the equivalent of when you realise, particularly if you're doing a long run of a stage show, and you realise that you can still do it when you're not feeling well physically. If you're a bit ill and you realise, I can actually still get through this show and it's fine. And the relief that brings. Yeah. Exactly the same if you're like, well, I was feeling really anxious and actually it was fine. Yeah. Like nobody really noticed other than me. So at least it takes away the meta anxiety of being anxious about the initial anxiety. Yeah. And then just before we do sort of the last couple of questions, I just want to bring in stage managers as well, and whether that's stage managers in the theatre or whether even to a certain extent key crew people as well, because there is also a level of performance anxiety that goes into that, but they don't necessarily get the same payoff in a sense of having done a show and the sort of the adrenaline burning activity of doing a show. I mean, is there any advice or any thoughts that you have around the sort of the stage crew and the stage management side of things, what they can do?
I think they are doing a performance in their own way. I'm sure they get the same sort of anxiety and apprehension beforehand and have to behave in certain ways when they're doing that job, which is slightly different to their inner normal authentic self, if you like. So I think they are doing a performance. They just don't have the validation of the applause at the end, or the full stop of the applause at the end. And I think that's where there might be a problem. So they have to think very carefully, I would have thought, about their cool down routine after that performance and how they come down from it, and hopefully don't involve alcohol in that, or certainly too much alcohol, because they do need a period of coming down from it.
That's interesting. Just building in, I guess, in the same way that as an actor, as we've talked about earlier, you build in the time before the show to do your visualizations or to whatever it is, just building in that chunk of time afterwards for the come down and just making sure that's part of the routine is really good.
Well, you wouldn't go in a gym and suddenly pick up a massive weight and without warming up.
I've seen it happen.
Well, and you've seen the consequences as well.
Exactly.
You know, you would warm up and you would cool down.
And
psychologically, you should do the same for a performance.
That's really interesting, thinking of it like a little graph almost, of just that you warm up into the psychology of it and then down the other side as well. That's, it also explains why no one can ever sleep for hours, I suppose, when they come off as well. That's
wired.
Good to know. So I suppose on a very, very practical level, Fiona, what can people do, or where can people go if they feel that they're really struggling with something like this and they need some help from someone else?
Well, in the first instance, you can seek help from somewhere like BAPM, which helps performing artists, and or Equity, that both offer counselling for artists that are struggling with this, or a lot of workshops and handouts as well. on this, or you can go and see a GP if you think you need medication.
Yeah.
Or if you can't access counselling through any of these methods, you can possibly think about trying to fund therapy yourself if you actually feel that you need help and self-help is not going to do it for you.
Yeah. And I'm assuming BAPAM is a really good resource for that in terms of finding a therapist as well.
Brilliant. They've got a register and they've got loads of fact sheets and ways of helping you. But
that's great.
You know, some people might need a little bit more help than helping themselves. But
yeah,
I think the thing to remember is that these things don't stay constant. They change, and it can just be a phase or a period as well.
Yeah.
That's the other thing to remember.
Yeah.
But there is help out there, definitely, and increasingly more specialised help for these particular sorts of issues.
That's great. We'll put some links in the show notes as well for this podcast to different things. And then Tanya, just to finish up, I guess, I mean, you've already given a few bits of advice that people have given you, so I don't know whether you have another one that you want to add in terms of dealing with a particularly good piece of advice, but also what advice would you give someone else who's struggling with this?
I think, I mean, I would steal Fiona's advice and try and
no
pass
one will
that
know
off
that you're passing it
as my
off. No, it's
own.
fine.
I think what you said earlier about spending as much time preparing yourself mentally as, you know, you do line learning, I think that's so good. And that's something that I'm trying to do at the moment. But yeah, because once you free your brain up from the constricts of anxiety, I feel like it just makes it all feel so much easier, and you can play and you can access parts of your performance that maybe you wouldn't be able to if it's frozen in anxiety. So I think that's a really good shout. And I find meditation really difficult. But I find trying to I try and mix up meditation and manifestation together, because I find I can't sit and think of nothing, but I sit and try and think of positive affirmations. Mm-hmm. So yeah, sit and do some positive affirmations sandwiched between your line learning.
Very Gen Z.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for being so honest, Tanya, as well, and just bringing everything. And Fiona, for your amazing contribution as well. I think everything you've said is incredibly, incredibly useful from both of you. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. So great. Fiona and Tanya, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the ABF podcast. If you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this episode, you can find helpful links in the show notes. If you would like to become a member of the ABF, support us, or require support, you can find everything you need on our website, details of which are also in the show notes. Until next time, goodbye.